We are obsessed with monsters. We hunt them in myths, in movies, in the faces of people we already distrust. From the silver screen to our private nightmares, we keep searching for the enemy. But if you trace the devil back to his origin, not through horror films, but through scripture, something uncomfortable appears. He wasn't always the king of hell. He wasn't even a rebel. He was an employee. In the earliest Jewish tradition, Hasatan is not God's rival. He is God's prosecutor. In the book of Job, he stands inside the divine court, not as a tempter, but as an auditor. His task is simple and terrifying: to test whether human goodness is real or merely convenient. He does not whisper evil into your ear. He asks a colder question. Would this person still be good if comfort were taken away? Here, the enemy is not chaos. He is function, a tool of divine justice. Evil is not an external force. It is a stress test. But history does not leave ideas untouched. As the world moved toward empire, toward Rome, hierarchy, and mass belief, the devil changed. The prosecutor became the rebel. The auditor became the prince of darkness. This was no longer a legal drama, it was cosmic war. By creating a separate embodiment of evil, the narrative shifted something crucial. Human suffering no longer had to be traced back to God. Pain could be outsourced. Blame could be relocated. And so Satan became necessary, a scapegoat large enough to carry the unbearable weight of human misery. This devil introduced the choice. Choose good or evil. Choose salvation or damnation. A powerful theological tool, especially for empires that required obedience, fear, and redemption. Then Islam enters the story, and the figure fractures again. Iblis refuses to bow to Adam, but not because he rejects God. He believes in God too much. His sin is not disbelief, it is kibir, absolute arrogance. I am better, he says. My story is superior. Here, the devil is no longer external opposition. He is psychological collapse. The moment when identity hardens into pride, and pride blinds the soul. Centuries later, Sufi thinkers like Shams Tabrizi strip away the horns entirely. Shams says something radical. Do not search for Satan in the distance. Satan is within yourself. In this reading, the devil is not an angel or a demon. He is the ego. The voice that says, I am right and you are lesser. Shams tells us to find God in the hearts of others, and Satan in ourselves. But history takes a darker turn. Orthodoxy hardens, power centralizes, fear becomes policy, and the devil is externalized again. Now he wears the faces of other faiths, other cultures, other ways of living. Those who should have taught self-examination teach accusation instead. The evolution reverses. We stop looking inward, we point outward. We place God inside our own certainty and Satan inside everyone else. And maybe that is the real tragedy. Not that the devil exists, but that we have become so skilled at projecting him onto others that we no longer recognize him when he speaks in our own voice. The monster was never just out there. He learned to live in the mirror.
There is a famous story about young Abraham in Islamic tradition. He enters the temple of his people and smashes all the small idols. Only the largest idol is left standing. When his father confronts him and asks, "Who did this?" Abraham answers, "The big idol destroyed the smaller ones. His father is stunned. How can an idol destroy another? And Abraham delivers the line that echoes through history. If these idols cannot protect themselves, how can they protect us? It sounds reasonable, even profound. Why should humans protect their gods? Why should the divine depend on our fragile hands? Abraham's argument introduces a powerful idea. A true God does not need guarding. A true God guards us. But history tells a different story, a disturbing one. Because the God Abraham introduced ended up needing more protection than any idol ever did. Stone idols sat quietly in temples. They demanded offerings, not armies. But the God of Abraham required soldiers, laws, borders, courts, executions, and endless vigilance. History shows us something strange. There have been godless kings, but there has never been a kingless God. Empires rose claiming to protect him. States formed to defend his honor. Armies marched to fight his enemies. We are told again and again that wars are fought for God. But listen carefully. When militants say they are fighting God's enemies, they are not describing divine strength. They are admitting divine vulnerability. A God who can be insulted, a God who can be threatened, a God who must be saved. This is the paradox we never resolved. Abraham mocked idols because they needed protection. Yet the God who replaced them demanded far more. Entire civilizations reorganized themselves around guarding him. Interfaith wars, sectarian bloodshed, inquisitions, crusades, takfir, excommunication, exile. The cost was not symbolic. It was counted in human bodies. The irony cuts deep. The God who was supposed to protect humanity became the reason humanity needed protection from itself. And this raises an uncomfortable question. What if Abraham's argument was only powerful rhetoric, but flawed logic? Yes, idols need guarding, but so did God. In fact, God required more guards, more sacrifices, more policing of thought than idols ever did. And humanity paid the price. Children inherited hatreds. Neighbors became heretics overnight. Empathy collapsed under doctrine. Curiosity became treason. All in the name of protecting God. But perhaps the real tragedy is this. If God truly needs protection, then he is not God. And if God does not need protection, then what were we fighting for? Maybe the wars were never about him. Maybe they were about power wearing holiness, fear in faith's clothing, and God only a scapegoat. But humans refusing to admit that the violence was ours. Abraham asked a brilliant question. How can a God who cannot protect itself protect us? History answers back quietly. the moment we started protecting God, we stopped protecting each other. And that is the true cost. If we look at Abraham across the three Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, something strange begins to appear. He stops looking like a single historical personality and starts resembling something else entirely. A symbol, a civilizational mirror, a figure reshaped by each faith to reflect its deepest priorities. In Judaism, Abraham is not silent. He questions God, he argues, he reasons, he challenges divine judgment itself. When God declares the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, Abraham does not submit. He asks, "Will you destroy the righteous with the wicked?" This is not rebellion, it is moral negotiation. Because in Jewish tradition, faith is not blind obedience. It is a covenant, and a covenant is never one-sided. This is why debate, disagreement, and questioning are not threats to Jewish faith. They are its foundation. The Talmud is not a book of answers. It is a record of arguments. Here, Abraham is remembered not as the one who obeyed without question, but as the one who believed God could be questioned. When we move to Christianity, something shifts. Abraham changes. In the writings of St. Paul, he becomes the father of faith. But faith now means trust, not dialogue. The moral conversation fades into the background. Grace takes its place. The story of sacrifice transforms. What was once a troubling ethical dilemma becomes a symbol of perfect belief. This is where faith begins to separate from reason. Salvation is no longer something argued for, it is something received. Christian theology strengthens the idea that the human mind does not save. Faith does. Then comes Islam. Here, Abraham is called Hanif, pure, singular, unwavering. His greatness lies not in questioning, but in submission. He does not argue, he does not hesitate. Whether stepping into fire or raising the knife, his virtue is absolute obedience. In this version, faith reaches its highest form when questions disappear entirely. Abraham becomes the model not just for belief, but for authority. And this model echoes forward into law, politics, caliphate, and religious power. So the question emerges, did Abraham evolve? Or did religious institutions select the version of Abraham they needed most? If Abraham was a historical man, which version is authentic? Or is the better question this: why did each religion preserve a different Abraham? Judaism chose the questioner. Christianity chose the believer. Islam chose the obedient. These are not just theological differences, they are civilizational ones. Where questioning is sacred, knowledge and reinterpretation grow. Where faith detaches from reason, certainty grows. And so does stillness. But there is another possibility. What if Abraham changed because God changed? At first, God listens. He reasons. He appears willing to reconsider. Then, gradually, he demands less dialogue and more belief. And finally, he becomes absolute. Why? Because small societies can survive on trust. Large societies require control.
When surveillance does not exist, divine surveillance must. The larger the society, the stricter the God, the more obedient Abraham.